Here's our roadmap for today. We've got a structured executive journey ahead. We'll start with the reactive procurement trap, then the strategic sourcing shift, understanding reality and markets, building the strategy, execution and integration, and finally, continuous strategic control. All right, let's just jump right in. Section 1. The reactive procurement trap. You can think of this as the ordinary world in our journey.
You know, a lot of organizations still operate with this old kind of chaotic mindset. They genuinely believe procurement is just about buying materials, negotiating prices, and managing suppliers. But the modern reality demands a major shift. Procurement really has to be viewed as strategic portfolio management. It's a vital decision-making system, and the quality of those decisions, well, that determines whether your company grows with stability or operates in a state of permanent, exhausting disruption.
Let's think about how that disruption actually happens. It's almost never a sudden catastrophic event out of nowhere. A delay in procurement compounds exactly like bad financial interest. It's like a small hesitation, say, postponing a sourcing event today, escalates into a massive cost increase tomorrow. And if a supplier risk is just ignored, by next quarter, you're facing a total factory shutdown. Teams get trapped in this reactive firefighting loop, not because they lack intelligence, but because they lack structure. And without structure, well, everything just becomes reactive.
Section 2. The strategic sourcing shift. Basically, our call to adventure. Simplification is not always optimization. It's a great point, right? Because naturally, when you try to introduce a structured system, organizations are going to resist. Leaders will say things like, hey, can we simplify this? Can we just move faster? But as the Supply Tricksis method warns us, when procurement teams remove structure just to go faster, they accidentally destroy their decision quality. They might collect some data and run a few quotes, but the core logic completely disappears. And once that logic is gone, you are right back to being a reactive administration. Strategic sourcing is really about forcing clarity into the decisions that matter most, financially and operationally. So to fix that, this philosophy builds on a really solid 6-step foundation. We go from profiling and market analysis straight through to strategy, the sourcing process, negotiation, and finally integration and control. These 6 steps are the exact mechanisms that create visibility, consistency, scalability, and that ultimate executive control we're looking for.
Moving right along to Section 3, understanding reality and markets. We really have to start by asking a deceptively simple question. What exactly are we buying? And I mean actually buying. Profiling has to start with actual reality, not historical assumptions or some outdated contract from 5 years ago. This is the exact moment where procurement professionals stop acting like simple buyers and transform into true business analysts. They have to ask how the business depends on the item, what happens if the supply fails, and where the value is actually being created. Let's ground this in a real-world example, like cocoa sourcing. To buy cocoa effectively, you have to map the internal reality, things like harvest cycles, climate sensitivity, and seasonal yield volatility, directly against the external market. That means understanding the global trading networks, supplier concentration, and the specific geopolitics of sourcing from places like Ghana and Côte d'Ivoire. If you don't know these things, you aren't managing a category. You're just blindly placing orders. Deep profiling is what creates real strategic visibility.
And doing that level of deep market analysis, it forces a complete mindset shift. You literally stop asking, what do we buy? And instead you start asking, what is realistically possible in this market and where are we actually exposed? That is a completely different, much higher level of strategic thinking.
Which brings us to Section 4, building the strategy. Because let's be real, analysis alone creates zero value until it actually informs a decision. This is where we design the game plan. Strategy acts as the bridge between all that great information we gathered and our actual execution. Continuing with our cocoa example, strategy dictates the specifics, exactly where to diversify across continents, where to invest in supplier development, where to lock in those long-term agreements over short-term savings, and how to build risk-based allocation models. This is the moment procurement leaves the realm of a support function and officially becomes strategic portfolio management.
Suppliers respond more to structure than to intention. Honestly, this is one of the most underestimated truths in the industry. You can have all the good intentions in the world, but if your execution mechanisms are weak, the strategy fails. Suppliers are actively segmenting you as a customer every day. They look at your sourcing process and they decide if you're a strategic partner or just a transactional burden. Your sourcing process itself actually alters supplier behavior. It literally becomes your company's identity in the market.
Section 5, execution and integration. This is where things get very real, taking that strategy straight into the boardroom. When it's time for negotiations and supplier selection, decisions become real. But remember, it's not just about haggling over the lowest price anymore. It is a major governance decision. Procurement needs to completely align with leadership on operational risk. And that means wielding tools like net present value, internal rate of return, economic value added, and payback analysis. You have to speak the language of executive finance, not just because finance demands it, but because leadership literally requires a common language to validate these massive strategic decisions.
But, and this is absolutely crucial, getting boardroom approval is not the finish line. In fact, if integration fails, the strategy never actually existed. Period. Value doesn't live inside a beautiful PowerPoint presentation. It lives in operational reality. You have to embed those suppliers into your workflows, activate the contracts, align your systems, and ensure compliance. Without integration, the whole thing was just theory.
And finally, Section 6, continuous strategic control. This is where we build a system that actually learns. Once you're fully integrated, you absolutely need a relentless feedback loop. We're talking measuring savings realization, continuity improvement, risk reduction, and evaluating supplier performance. By tracking these specific metrics, strategic sourcing stops being this painful annual event or a one-time initiative. It transforms into a continuously improving decision system that builds organizational clarity even when the environment is highly uncertain. Which leaves us with this final thought to chew on. The organizations that win are not the ones making the most decisions. They are the ones making the clearest decisions. Take a second to reflect on your own organization. Are you guys just making a high volume of reactive choices, or do you have the actual structure in place to make clear, strategic decisions? Building that structure, that is the true power of strategic sourcing.